Hi all, let's continue our look at the evolution of chess style and check out a bit more Isaac Boleslavsky. He was known for a few things actually. One of them was the Boleslavsky hole, which is a weakness on d5. Now the game I'm going to show you is not that aspect, but rather another aspect. Boleslavsky, together with other fellow Ukrainians, according to Wiki, Bronstein, Geller and Konstantinovsky, beginning in the late 1930s, turned the King's Indian defense from a suspect variation into one of the most popular defenses today. So, in fact, Hans Kmock in the book Pawn Power in Chess calls the King's Indian configuration of the black pawns on c6 and d6, especially if the d pawn is on a semi-open file, the Boleslavsky wall. I've lost a few games in that variation. Sometimes it's double-edged. So this is creating risks, but to create winning chances. And if you want to win tournaments, sometimes you create risks. Here in the 1950 World Candidates Tournament, he was black against Laszlo Szabo. So Szabo, a great player in his own right. For those that don't know, I can give you a quick bio on Szabo from chessgames.com. He was born in Budapest. At 18 he won the Hungarian Championship for the first of 9 times. Before World War II he worked in the foreign exchange department of the Budapest Bank. During World War II he was a Hungarian forced labour unit, unfortunately. He represented Hungary in 11 Olympiads, playing first board on 5 occasions and delivering many medal-winning performances. So a fantastic player, Hungarian player, Szabo. The pronunciation?
Szabo Laszlo.
Yeah. Annie K on chessgames.com, I think, pronounced that. Fantastic person doing the pronunciation on chessgames.com. Okay, so anyway, so let's have a look at this example King's Indian defense game from the 1950 Candidates Tournament. Knight f3 from Szabo, and we have knight f6. So we have an early King's Indian defense. So in 1950, what was the King's Indian defense like? It wasn't terribly well respected or known because it's giving white the center, it seems. White's just occupying the center. It's in hypermodern tradition to try and blow up the center after, let the opponent occupy the center. But what ideas are in this game which are interesting? Bishop e2, it seems fairly standard so far by modern standards. This is early d5. So I think this is a favourite of Petrosian, Tigger Petrosian, just immediately playing d5 here, not even waiting for knight c6. And some modern treatments involve playing things like a5, knight a6 to try and get this c5 square, queen e8 sometimes against a potential pin. We have here an immediate knight h5. And it seems this knight, isn't it a target now? Because white actually plays a counterintuitive move just to exploit this knight. White actually retreats his own knight here, just hitting h5 here. Now, if the thing is, if knight f4, white could be tricky about this. White can actually move this bishop, perhaps even to f1. But knight f4 wasn't chosen. We have a really dynamic idea now from Boleslavsky. In fact, can you guess what he plays? What shocking idea is available here to black? And I have actually seen this in a more modern Grandmaster game a few times at least, this idea. It's quite dangerous. If I give you 5 seconds, what would you play here with black? Okay, knight d7. You might think this is a little bit crazy, but this is dynamic aggressive chess, offering a gambit of a pawn basically to get rid of that light square bishop. Or what sort of impact will that have on white's light squares in this position? White did indeed take it, and his queen's obviously, by taking this pawn, his queen's out of the way for the moment and away from d3. Black plays knight c5, so not only knight d3 check would be annoying, but also the light squares are generally a bit weakened. Black's liberating f5 is fully on the cards here. So black's getting some practical compensation. Okay, the engines might not like this position, but white has weakened light squares. And if you look at games of Boleslavsky, he's often sacrificing pawns to improve his grip on a certain color complex. So this seems to be, you know, a very aggressive gambit, worth a punt in one's own King's Indian defense games. Knight f3, this immediate f5. Black's got the bishop pair, white's got weakened light squares, white castles, and now we see f4 shutting down the bishop and also potentially going to harass this queen with things like rook f6 to h6. White now plays b4, we have knight d7. The knight's actually kind of useful coming back to hit the queen as well with knight f6, potentially. Bishop b2. We have queen e7 now, knight g5. So hitting h7, of course, that has to be parried. Knight f6 also defending e6, so hitting the queen. Queen h4, the knight is evicted. It does go back. And now queen f7 unpinning. But some nasties here include ideas of knight g4 for bishop f6, because knight g4 would hold the h6 pawn, then we could play bishop f6. That would really embarrass the queen. So white has to get an escape route for his own queen here. Clearly black already has fantastic compensation for the pawn. So we see knight d2, knight g4. Can you imagine the King's Indian defense is not so well known then? So theoretically, people are having to improvise, and this looks like a bad improvisation for black, because even without the queen's harassment here, we've got this potentially dangerous g-file pressure along this line. This having a pawn missing here is in black's advantage with the king on the g-file. We have here f3, at least giving the queen an exit back, but compromising the e3 square. The knight goes into e3, hitting the rook. And if rook e1, knight c2, we see rook fc1. So the rooks are away from the king here. King h7, preparing to use the g-file, things like bishop f6 and rook g8. And with the knight on g2 already, this is dangerous stuff. This is extremely dangerous. Knight d1. Bishop f6, hitting the queen. Queen goes back. And now logically, there's a move here which accelerates black's attack in a beautiful manner. So black's already a pawn down. But guess what he plays in this position, which opens up his pieces to maximum power now. Black's pieces want to have absolute maximum attacking power in this position. So what would you play here? Would you exchange off on d1? Guess what he plays here? Black to play. Can you play like an aggressive King's Indian defense player? If I give you 5 seconds starting from now. Black to play. Yep, another positional pawn sack. Rook g8. Shed this pawn. Open up the dark squares. This bishop on b2 is not helping this particular diagonal. White did take here on e3. What else? Black is threatening rook takes g2. It looks pretty nasty. We have taking and grabbing this pawn. So does black have enough? Bishop g5. Queen e2. And you might think now, well, Szabo might have thought, well, what is black actually doing here? Is he just aiming to win a pawn back with bishop takes and then queen takes with this pin? Black did actually take on d2. Interesting to consider other moves not taking, but maybe white can actually try and fortify his position, for example, with bishop f4, knight f1. Maybe it's not entirely clear that black's going to have a crushing attack. But this is a very, very forcing continuation now. Bishop takes d2, weakening f3. But the point is not queen takes f3 here. This would backfire badly if queen takes f3. For example, rook f1. Here, check. And this position is in white's favor. This is getting dangerous for black. No, even stronger in this position. That's not the point, actually. What does black play in this position? Okay, bishop h3, yes, hitting g2, causing more weaknesses first. Now taking on f3, much stronger, much stronger. Holding that f1 square against rook f1. The queen's evicted, but losing that pawn here. If the queen wasn't evicted, then black simply threatens to double, and then queen f1 potentially is always dangerous. The rooks have to hold things, but also things like rook g3. It's just a very dangerous position crashing through if you imagine a rook sack and a rook coming to f2. So basically get the queen out of there before more trouble. Queen takes e4, so white's doing his own positional pawn sack to try and get back in the game and get some defense around his king here. c5, we have rook g7, which facilitates elegant doubling with rook f8, rook gf7 on f1, which would be threatening a mating net. Queen c2, trying to get the queens off. We have queen takes c2, rook takes c2, rook f8. Now black really wants to double, because then rook f1 is just end of game. If rook c1, for example, rook f2 will be crashing through on g2, etc. So white has to exchange off a pair of rooks here before this gets too much trouble. But this endgame is just nice for black here. This position here is nice. Why? Because the bishop and rook combine very well. The king is kind of hemmed in. Let's see the game continuation. Rook e1. The rook is able to come into the position, and this d5 is weak here. This d5 pawn is actually weak here. We have c takes, bishop c1. I mean, the white rook is tied down to f1 here. Rook d3 hitting that weak d5 pawn. If the d5 pawn goes, we've got two connected passed pawns in the center. Bishop e3. The pawn is moved here, which is attacked. This is just better for black after taking here. It's just better for black. Although white seems to have got his pieces out finally, but it's just better for black. h5, e4, and a few more moves here, but actually it's a pretty hopeless cause for white in this position. In fact, here after king e2, white actually resigns. Black is just miles better. He's got the two connected passed pawns in the center. A move like rook b3 seems logical and fair enough to carry on, and then d5 to follow with d4. These two passed pawns in the center will just be winning. So a very, very dynamic treatment of the King's Indian defense by Boleslavsky in this key tournament in 1950. So fantastic stuff. I think we can learn a lot from Boleslavsky, but this was just the King's Indian example. We should see some Boleslavsky whole examples soon in this series, where he's played on the black side of Sicilian defences, accepting the whole on d5, which of course we know he can expertly exploit from the white perspective. But let's have a look at a few more examples of his games and his ideas. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.